Let me ask you a question. Not a hypothetical one, not a philosophical one, but a personal question. When does your autonomy expire? Autonomy is the right to decide what happens to your body and your life according to your own values and wishes. So most of us would say, never. It would seem, by definition, that our autonomy never expires. We like to believe that our lives are ours, from beginning to end. But I want you to picture the very end of your life. Not the abstract idea of death, but the actual logistics of it. If you're sick, who decides what that looks like? Who decides what treatments you receive? Who decides how long those treatments continue? Who decides what level of pain, dependence, or degradation you must endure? And here's the harder question. At what point do those decisions stop being yours? Because for billions, with the B, of people around the world, autonomy does not end with death. It ends before death, quietly, legally, and with very little discussion. The reason many of us don't talk about it in Western society is simple. To talk about death, we have to confront our own mortality, and silence is our defense from that inevitable reality. In this society, death and illness are generally handled in a clinical setting, creating a more abstract connection with the realities of death. The business of dying has often been delegated to institutions who treat dying as a failure rather than simply a completion. And ultimately, most of us haven't been forced to face it yet. So here's the simple idea I want to leave you with today. Human autonomy does not and should not expire at the end of life. And yet laws around the world often fail to fully protect end-of-life autonomy. Not because we debated it and rejected it, but simply because we never included it in the first place. In 1948, in the shadow of World War II, the world came together to create something extraordinary, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was spearheaded by Eleanor Roosevelt after witnessing what happens when human dignity is stripped away by governments, ideology, and fear. The Declaration outlines 30 fundamental rights. You are born free and equal in dignity. You have the right to not be tortured. You have the freedom of thought, belief, and opinion. You have the right to education, to due process, to bodily security. It is the most translated document in the world. It's the foundation of international human rights law. And yet, there is no right that directly addresses how your life may end. Instead, leaving how we end our lives to local laws, creating a patchwork where dignity at death isn't universally protected. There's limited recognition of autonomy when illness takes control. No specific protection of dignity when the body fails. No clear assurance that end-of-life decisions fall under those birth-given freedoms. We gained the right to live, but not the right to decide how we stop living. And that omission made sense at the time. People were not surviving decades attached to machines. They weren't living with progressive neurological disease, repeated cancers, or prolonged medical dependence. Medicine evolved. The law did not. Life expectancy has increased by more than 20 years since the Declaration was adopted. At the global level, in 1950, men were expected to live 48.1 years and women 52.9, the same age I am now. By 2017, these had increased to 70.5 years for men and 75.6 for women. That sounds like progress, but longevity without agency is not a gift. It's an obligation. And for some people, forced longevity could feel like torture. And we never ask the most important follow-up questions. Are those added years meaningful years? And who gets to decide that? I think about this often, partly because I'm human and aging just like everyone else, partly because I live with chronic health issues and have had my own near-death experiences, partly because I watched my father suffer through a terminal illness with limited options, and partly because of my grandmother. She is 96 years old. She is sharp. She is opinionated. She is fully herself, whether we always want her to be or not. She's made clear decisions about her future medical care. She's refused certain interventions and drawn her own lines. And yet, she tells me she's bored, lonely, that she feels she has nothing left to do but wait. Wait for the thing that will finally kill her. And here in Ohio, that's her only legal option: waiting. After nearly a century, she has the right to refuse treatments, but no legal right to actively choose how her life ends. So I ask you this: what do you think happens to a human spirit when autonomy is removed at the very moment it matters most? Not having end-of-life autonomy is not just an omission, it actively undermines existing human rights. If all people are born free and equal in dignity, when does that dignity stop mattering? If we all agree that no one should be subjected to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment, how is forced, prolonged suffering exempt? If we have freedom of belief and conscience, why does someone else's beliefs dictate and legislate the limits of your life? Denying end-of-life autonomy undermines the dignity and liberty the Declaration promises from birth. So this is not radical, it's just logically consistent. And this isn't just theoretical. In most of the world, assisting someone to die, even compassionately, is a crime. Families are forced to watch loved ones suffer. Generational wealth can be spent simply sustaining lives. Many patients are forced to isolation or desperation. Others attempt to end their lives without medical support, leading to failed attempts, additional trauma, or permanent injury. And many people die alone, not wanting to implicate anyone they love, because friends and caregivers risk prosecution for helping or even knowing about plans. But this denies loved ones the ability to provide emotional or even logistical support, or to simply be there at the end of someone's life. And how is that not cruel and inhumane? Even where physician-assisted dying is legal, access is narrow, with many levels of qualifying criteria. Terminal diagnosis, 6-month prognosis, multiple physicians, multiple waiting periods, repeated requests. And still, many are excluded. If you can't physically administer medication to yourself because of ALS, Parkinson's, MS, or neurological decline, you may lose eligibility entirely. Your body fails you. Then the law fails you again. Let me offer you a scenario. Imagine this is your friend. Let's call her Anne. She's 40 years old. She's been battling breast cancer. She's exhausted. She tells you she doesn't want to keep fighting. And she asks for your help. Do you help her? What factors influence your decision? What if she has children? What if she doesn't? What if instead of your friend, she's your mother, your wife, your daughter? What if instead of 40, she's 70? What if she's 20? What if this is the fourth recurrence? What if she's in constant pain, but not technically terminal? When did her voice stop being enough? And finally, why do your thoughts on any of this matter? Whose life is it anyway? Autonomy because we're sick. We lose it because others become uncomfortable. We now have real-world data. In these places around the world where physician-assisted suicide exists to varying extents, these laws do not create mass death. They do not get weaponized. They do not create death panels. They do not target vulnerable populations. They do not replace care. What they do create is peace of mind, the knowledge that you're still seen as a whole person, that your wishes matter, that you're not trapped. Most people who qualify never actually use the option, but they find hope knowing that an option of control exists. We struggle with this conversation because we argue around morality instead of rights. But rights don't protect behavior. They simply protect choice. Legislating the details of this right will obviously differ based on culture and what makes sense in each corner of the world. So all that required documentation, confirmations, and waiting periods looks different depending on where you are. With some countries having far fewer restrictions, or with legal self-termination available to those suffering with severe treatment-resistant depression or other chronic conditions. Because they recognize that not all pain and suffering is purely physical. And to honor the right of lifelong personal autonomy, you have to leave it up to the individual to define suffering and living for themselves. But I'm not here to dictate or even discuss the particulars. Rather, I'm just asking that end-of-life autonomy be recognized as part of the human rights the Declaration established. A right doesn't dictate the how of self-termination of life, but only the what of the concept of lifelong autonomy. Having the right doesn't mean you must use it. It means the decision remains yours, and yours alone. Medicine already recognizes limits to care. Even Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, acknowledged that there is a point where treatment should cease, and that release can be the most humane form of care. Autonomy isn't the enemy of compassion. It is compassion. Here's the realization that changed everything for me. If your life is not yours to decide at the end, then it was never fully yours at all. The system simply tolerated your autonomy until it became inconvenient. I want to be clear about what I'm asking. I'm not asking you to agree with assisted dying. I'm not asking you to imagine choosing it for yourselves. And I'm not asking you to abandon your beliefs or your effort. I'm asking you to recognize a boundary, the boundary between your beliefs and someone else's life. A right to die with dignity doesn't force death. It doesn't devalue life. And it doesn't replace care or compassion. It does something simpler and far more important. It keeps the final decision where it belongs, with the person living that life. Dignity shouldn't disappear when the body weakens. Autonomy shouldn't expire when dependence begins. Human rights shouldn't end when things become difficult. If dignity only applies when we're healthy, independent, and productive, then it was never dignity at all. It was permission. And permission can be revoked. So when we talk about the right to die with dignity, we're not talking about death. We're talking about ownership. Who owns your life when things go wrong? Who owns your body when it no longer functions as expected? Who owns your final moments when you can no longer advocate for yourself? If the answer to these questions is not you, and you alone, then the dignity promised by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights doesn't extend through life's end as it should. Because a life that's not yours to finish was never fully yours to begin with. So I'll leave you with the same question I began with. When does your autonomy expire?